My name is Evelyn, and this is a story about how the world I built for myself crumbled under the weight of betrayal. If you had asked me 5 years ago where I would be today, I wouldn't have hesitated to tell you. Sitting comfortably in my corner office at Sterling and Company, sipping coffee while reviewing reports that reflected months of hard work. But life has an uncanny way of testing your limits, doesn't it? It throws curveballs when you least expect them, and sometimes those curveballs come wrapped in designer suits with perfectly manicured nails. Let me take you back to the beginning, or rather, what felt like the end. For over a decade, I poured my heart into Sterling and Company. I wasn't just another cog in the corporate machine. I was the cog. The one who stayed late on Fridays, skipped lunches during busy seasons, and even answered emails from my hospital bed after emergency surgery. Yes, that happened. My colleagues called me dependable. My boss called me indispensable. And clients praised me as someone who could make the impossible possible. So imagine my shock when one day, out of nowhere, everything changed. It started innocently enough. A new hire joining our team. Her name was Natalie. She walked into the office like she owned the place, her heels clicking against the polished marble floors with confidence that bordered on arrogance. At first glance, she seemed impressive. Sharp, ambitious, and eager to prove herself. We all were once, weren't we? But there was something about her demeanor, something cold and calculating beneath her polished exterior, that made me uneasy. Still, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. After all, I'd spent years mentoring fresh talent, helping them grow into their roles. Why should Natalie be any different? Natalie quickly climbed the ranks, faster than anyone else I'd ever seen. Within 6 months, she went from being a junior associate to presenting strategies directly to upper management. People whispered behind closed doors, calling her a force to be reckoned with. And maybe she was, but not always in a good way. Slowly but surely, I began noticing subtle shifts in the dynamics around me. Projects I had championed for months suddenly became hers. Ideas I pitched in meetings reappeared verbatim in her presentations. At first, I chalked it up to coincidence. Maybe I was paranoid. Or maybe I was too tired to see what was happening right under my nose. Then came the day I'll never forget. The day Natalie took my job. Not figuratively, but literally. I arrived at the office early as usual, only to find an email summoning me to an urgent meeting with HR and senior leadership. When I walked into the conference room, Natalie was already seated, looking smug in her tailored blazer. That's when they told me, the words still echo in my mind, they were restructuring the department, consolidating roles, and Natalie would now oversee my responsibilities. They spun it as a cost-saving measure, a strategic decision for the company's future. But I knew better. This wasn't about efficiency or innovation. This was personal. What hurt most wasn't losing the title or the salary. It was the way Natalie delivered the final blow. As I sat there, stunned and speechless, she leaned forward and said, "Evelyn, don't take this personally. You've done great work here, but let's face it, you're outdated. The industry is evolving, and we need someone who can keep up." Outdated. The word hit me like a slap across the face. Me. Outdated? After everything I'd sacrificed, every late night and missed family dinner, every ounce of energy I poured into making Sterling and Company successful, all reduced to 2 cruel syllables. I didn't cry, not then anyway. Instead, I nodded politely, thanked them for their transparency, and excused myself from the room. Once outside, I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Who was this woman staring back at me? Was I really as irrelevant as Natalie claimed? The questions swirled in my head, each one more painful than the last. But amidst the chaos, a spark ignited within me, a quiet determination to fight back, not just for myself, but for every person who's ever been dismissed or underestimated. Over the next few weeks, I played the part of the gracious loser. I handed over files, trained Natalie on processes, and maintained a professional demeanor despite the storm brewing inside me. On the surface, I appeared calm and composed, but beneath the mask I was plotting my revenge. Not the kind fueled by anger or bitterness, but the kind born out of justice. Because deep down, I knew Natalie's rise to power wasn't built on merit alone. It was propped up by deceit, manipulation, and stolen ideas. The first step was gathering evidence. I scoured old emails, meeting notes, and project timelines, piecing together a trail that proved Natalie's schemes. Late nights turned into early mornings as I meticulously documented every instance of plagiarism, every undercutting move she made to climb higher. It was exhausting but also exhilarating. For the first time in months, I felt alive again, like I was reclaiming control over my narrative. Meanwhile, Natalie strutted around the office like she owned it, basking in her newfound authority. She held court in meetings, doling out assignments and taking credit for initiatives she barely understood. Watching her operate was almost comical, if it weren't so infuriating. Still, I kept my distance, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Patience, after all, is key in situations like these. That moment came sooner than expected. Upper management announced a quarterly review session, a high-stakes presentation where department heads would outline their plans for the upcoming year. Success meant securing additional funding and resources. Failure meant scrutiny and potential cuts. Naturally, Natalie volunteered to lead our division's pitch, eager to cement her status as the golden child of Sterling and Company. Little did she know, this was exactly the opportunity I'd been waiting for. In the days leading up to the review, I worked tirelessly behind the scenes, ensuring every detail of Natalie's presentation aligned perfectly with my plan. I subtly suggested changes to her slides, knowing full well they contained glaring inconsistencies. I encouraged her to highlight specific projects, all of which trace back to ideas I had originally proposed. And I made sure key stakeholders, people who mattered most, were aware of my contributions, planting seeds of doubt about Natalie's authenticity. The morning of the review, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. Dressed in my sharpest suit, I exuded confidence, though my heart raced with anticipation. As I settled into my seat in the boardroom, I couldn't help but notice the nervous energy emanating from Natalie. She fidgeted with her notes, double-checked her slides, and avoided eye contact with anyone. Good. Let her sweat. When the meeting began, Natalie launched into her presentation with characteristic bravado. She spoke eloquently about growth strategies, market trends, and innovative solutions, all buzzwords designed to impress. But halfway through, cracks began to show. A senior executive raised a question about one of the projects she highlighted, pointing out discrepancies in the data. Another chimed in, asking why certain metrics contradicted previous reports. Natalie stumbled, trying to deflect blame onto technical glitches and miscommunication. The room grew tense as doubts spread like wildfire. And then, just as planned, it was my turn to speak. When the floor opened for discussion, I calmly raised my hand and addressed the board. "Thank you for bringing up those points," I began, my voice steady and measured. "I believe some clarification might be helpful here." From there, I proceeded to dismantle Natalie's facade piece by piece, presenting irrefutable evidence of her misconduct. Emails, timestamps, project drafts, all laid bare for everyone to see. The room fell silent as the truth sank in. But this wasn't just about exposing Natalie's lies. It was about reclaiming my dignity, proving to myself and others that I wasn't the outdated relic she claimed I was. With each word I spoke, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders, replaced by a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt in years. By the time I finished, the atmosphere in the room had shifted entirely. Eyes that once looked past me now focused intently, filled with respect and admiration. As for Natalie, she sat frozen in her chair, her carefully constructed image crumbling before her very eyes. For the first time since she walked into Sterling and Company, she looked small, vulnerable, and utterly defeated. Guilt washed over her face as she realized the magnitude of her actions and the consequences awaiting her. Yet, this was only the beginning. While the board deliberated on what to do next, I knew my journey was far from over. Revenge, no matter how satisfying, isn't the ultimate goal. True victory lies in rebuilding, reinventing, and emerging stronger than ever. And that's exactly what I intended to do. The boardroom was eerily quiet after my presentation, the kind of silence that feels heavy, almost suffocating, as if the air itself is holding its breath. Natalie sat rigid in her seat, her face pale and her hands trembling slightly on the table. She glanced around the room, searching for allies or some semblance of support, but found none. Even her usual cheerleaders, the ones who had praised her innovative thinking just weeks earlier, were avoiding eye contact, their faces unreadable masks of discomfort. I watched her carefully, feeling a mix of emotions bubbling inside me. Satisfaction, yes, but also pity. It wasn't that I wanted to see her destroyed. Rather, I wanted her to understand the weight of what she'd done. To feel the sting of guilt, not just for betraying me, but for undermining the trust of everyone in the room. This wasn't about petty revenge anymore. It was about accountability, about showing her that actions have consequences, no matter how cleverly you think you've covered your tracks. After what felt like an eternity, the CEO cleared his throat and broke the silence. "Evelyn," he said, turning to me with a look of genuine regret in his eyes, "thank you for bringing this to our attention. Clearly, there are discrepancies here that need to be addressed." He paused, glancing briefly at Natalie before continuing. "We'll convene privately to discuss next steps, but please know that your contributions to this company have not gone unnoticed. We owe you an apology." His words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to let loose years of pent-up frustration, to tell them exactly how it felt to be dismissed, overlooked, and ultimately replaced by someone who didn't deserve the position. But instead, I simply nodded, keeping my composure intact. "Thank you," I said evenly. "I hope we can move forward in a way that reflects the values this company claims to uphold." The meeting adjourned shortly afterward, leaving me alone with my thoughts. As I gathered my things and stepped out of the boardroom, I couldn't help but notice the whispers following me down the hallway. Colleagues who had once distanced themselves now approached cautiously, offering tentative smiles and murmured apologies. Some even went so far as to congratulate me on exposing the truth. It was surreal, almost disorienting, to go from being invisible to suddenly being seen again. But amidst the sea of well-wishers, one thing became clear. While I had won this battle, the war was far from over. The fallout from today's events would ripple through Sterling and company for months to come, reshaping relationships, reputations, and power dynamics. And I knew better than anyone that corporate politics were never straightforward. Revenge might taste sweet, but rebuilding trust? That was the real challenge. Over the next few days, the office buzzed with rumors and speculation. Natalie had been placed on administrative leave, pending an investigation, though everyone knew her career at Sterling and Company was effectively over. In her absence, I was asked to step back into my old role temporarily, a decision met with both relief and skepticism among the team. Relief because they trusted me to steer the ship during uncertain times. Skepticism because no one knew whether this was truly a fresh start or merely a band-aid solution. At first, I struggled to find my footing. After everything that had happened, stepping back into the same environment felt strange, almost surreal. Every corner of the office held memories, some good, others painful, that tugged at my resolve. There were moments when doubt crept in, whispering cruel reminders of how easily I had been cast aside. Was I really ready to dive back into this world, knowing full well it could chew me up and spit me out all over again? Yet, deep down, I knew I couldn't walk away, not yet. Walking away would mean letting Natalie win, letting her define my worth based on her lies. So I dug my heels in, determined to prove, not just to others, but to myself, that I still belonged here. That I was more than capable of thriving in an industry that often favored youth over experience, flash over substance. Rebuilding trust with my team wasn't easy. Many of them had stood by silently as Natalie dismantled my reputation, unwilling to risk their own standing by speaking up. While I understood their hesitation, it didn't make forgiveness any easier. Still, I made a conscious effort to lead with empathy, recognizing that fear and self-preservation were powerful motivators. Slowly but surely, cracks began to form in the walls people had built around themselves, allowing genuine collaboration and camaraderie to seep back in. One afternoon, as I pored over reports in my office, there was a soft knock at the door. Looking up, I saw Rachel, one of my longest-standing colleagues, hovering nervously in the doorway. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked hesitantly. "Of course," I replied, gesturing for her to sit. "What's on your mind?" She hesitated, fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve before finally blurting out, "I'm sorry, Evelyn, for everything. I should have said something sooner, but I was scared. Scared of losing my job. Scared of making things worse." Her voice trailed off, thick with emotion. For a moment, I considered brushing her off, letting her squirm under the weight of her guilt. But then I remembered how exhausting it was to carry resentment, how much lighter I felt now that I'd confronted my own demons. "It's okay, Rachel," I said gently. You don't have to apologize. What matters is that we're moving forward together now. Her shoulders relaxed visibly, and she offered me a small, grateful smile. Thank you, she whispered. And for what it's worth, I've always believed in you, even when I didn't say it out loud. That conversation marked a turning point, not just for Rachel and me, but for the entire team. Word spread quickly about my willingness to forgive, and soon others began opening up, sharing their frustrations and fears about working under Natalie's leadership. Together, we started unpacking the damage she had caused, piece by painful piece, until the fragments of our fractured team began to fit back together. As weeks turned into months, I found myself growing more confident in my ability to lead, not just the team, but the company as a whole. Upper management took notice too, praising my efforts to restore morale and productivity within the department. Rumors swirled that I might be considered for a permanent promotion, perhaps even a seat at the executive table. It was flattering, certainly, but it also forced me to confront a question I hadn't fully considered before. Did I want to climb higher in this toxic hierarchy? The truth was, I wasn't sure. On one hand, the idea of wielding influence at the highest levels appealed to me. I imagined implementing policies that prioritize transparency and fairness, creating a workplace where loyalty and hard work were rewarded rather than exploited. But on the other hand, I couldn't ignore the toll this environment had taken on me and countless others. How many late nights, missed milestones, and broken promises had I sacrificed for the sake of ambition? Was it worth it? These questions gnawed at me constantly, pulling me in opposite directions. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every decision I'd ever made, every compromise I'd accepted in pursuit of success. And yet, despite the uncertainty, one thing remained clear. I refused to let anyone else dictate my value ever again. So I kept pushing forward, navigating the delicate balance between ambition and authenticity. I poured my energy into mentoring younger employees, teaching them the importance of integrity and resilience in a cutthroat industry. I advocated for changes in company culture, challenging outdated practices that prioritized profit over people. And slowly, incrementally, I began to carve out a new identity, one that honored my past without being defined by it. Then came the day I received an unexpected email invitation to speak at a women's leadership conference. The subject line caught my eye immediately: Empowering Women in Business, Lessons from Experience. Curious, I opened the message and scanned the details. They wanted me to share my story, my struggles, my triumphs, and the lessons I'd learned along the way. At first, I laughed it off. Who would want to hear about my messy, complicated journey? Surely, they had mistaken me for someone else. But the more I thought about it, the more intrigued I became. Maybe this was an opportunity, not just to reflect on my own experiences, but to inspire others facing similar challenges. To remind them that setbacks don't define us, they shape us. That sometimes the hardest battles yield the greatest victories. By the time I hit accept, a sense of purpose washed over me, stronger than anything I'd felt in years. This wasn't just about reclaiming my place in the corporate world anymore. It was about using my voice to create change, to ensure that no one else had to endure what I had endured. Little did I know, this decision would set off a chain reaction that would alter the course of my life forever. By the time the conference arrived, I stood on stage, heart pounding but voice steady, sharing my story with a room full of women who listened intently. As I spoke, I realized this wasn't just closure for me, it was a beginning. The applause that followed felt like validation, not of revenge or ambition, but of resilience. In the weeks after, I made a bold decision. I left Sterling and Company, trading boardrooms for a new path focused on mentoring and advocating for workplace equality. It wasn't easy, but it was freeing. Natalie's betrayal had once shattered me, but now it seemed almost insignificant compared to the life I'd built beyond her shadow. And as I walked away from that chapter, I finally understood. True victory isn't about proving others wrong. It's about staying true to yourself.